Global Black Studies is one of the newest minor programs offered at Western Carolina University. It may seem natural for universities to add courses all the time, and that may be the case. But Global Black Studies at Western was a result of student demand and protest. In this short documentary, we will explore a brief history of Global Black Studies at Western Carolina University and its precursor. But first, what are Global Black Studies?
Global Black Studies is part of the African American Studies, Africana Studies, or Pan-African Studies. Essentially, it's an interdisciplinary, comprehensive study of African descendant peoples across the world, their culture, their lives, their politics, economics, religion/spiritual practices. As I said, a comprehensive interdisciplinary study of African descendant people across the globe.
Now to the precursor. Black Studies and where it began. San Francisco State College was first in demanding a relevant education for black students on campus, something many other colleges would later replicate. In Fabio Rojas's book titled From Black Power to Black Studies, you learn that black studies were the product of protest. The 5 months of protest began November 6, 1968, and ended March 21, 1969. Led by the Third World Liberation Front, the Black Student Union, and the Black Panthers, times were turbulent to say the least. What started as demanding relevant education, boycotting classes, and organizing marches eventually evolved into a nationwide movement, partially because of how terribly the students at San Francisco were treated, both by the university and former Governor Ronald Reagan. There were numerous counts of violence and many arrests, and these type of events would often happen during peaceful protests. An amalgamation of things led to the protest, but at its core, it was a product of desegregation. For the first time, black students were allowed in white spaces, and colleges had not prepared programs for these incoming students. Some universities even chose not to room black students together. Alienation coupled with a white-centered curriculum would make any minority feel as if they had no autonomy. An amalgamation of things led to the protests, but at its core, it was a product of desegregation. The courses at San Francisco State were designed to prepare you for the real world. But at the time, this real world was comprised of white people, and it seemed black students were being acclimated to work in white environments. Students felt a relevant education should prepare them for problems within their own community, which was never discussed prior to 1969. A few of these relevant courses would explore topics like black economics, history, sociology, and psychology. The protests at San Francisco garnered nationwide attention, which helped further the push for black curriculum on college campuses. Martha Biondi's book titled The Black Revolution on Campus explores the expansion of black studies into schools like Northwestern and Illinois. Northwestern created their own black studies program as a reactive response to protest. Much like at Western Carolina University, upset students at Northwestern wrote their own list of demands, involving representation, black-focused courses, and their own space. This was known as the May 4th Agreement. However, not all schools were reactive in the development of black studies. Michigan would be an example of a program that was developed preemptively. Michigan would later grant a PhD program in the field. One other thing worth mentioning in Biondi's text was the use of violence. Often when black studies was developed as a reactionary measure, it was not uncommon for violence to be involved. You can find such cases in San Francisco and at Northwestern. The same cannot be said about WCU, since there were no recorded acts of violence on campus or police intervention. May 4th, 1968. The May 4th Agreement was Northwestern's response to white-centered curriculum and a lack of representation on campus. This was something also addressed in the collective response to racial insensitivity at Western. Both lists had similarities, but there was one demand that stood out. Northwestern urged that there be established a special Northwestern University Advisory Council as an instrument of university administration to function at all administrative levels as the administration deals with problems of the black community related to the university. This demand is interesting. When comparing Western's 7th demand in the section directed towards student government, it reads, "We expect for a position to be added to the SGA Executive Board that will focus on the need and concerns of underrepresented student groups on campus." The students at Western may have been inspired by the movements before them. Regardless, this was just one example of similar demands. There are more, and it's sad to think that these were written only 50 years apart. However, it is worth mentioning that over those 50 years, 361 colleges or universities began offering some variety of black studies. There are also currently 13 PhD granting programs. And with that, we move on to Western and the development of Global Black Studies.
Started here in August of 2014. It was my first teaching job, so it was kind of fresh out of grad school. Still trying to figure out how this whole teaching thing was going to work out. And I think coming in, I had an understanding that there had already been some racist incidents. For better or worse, I don't think students felt that they were being handled or treated appropriately. It also was a political environment that itself to more incidences of racism. If you can remember back to the election of Donald Trump, in this town even, much less on campus, you had people flying the Confederate flag all around. In the news, it just seemed like black folks were getting shot by the police like every other day. So it's like kind of in your face what was happening in the country at that time. And so I think even teaching what I teach with regards to sociology, I focus on race and ethnicity and those kind of issues. It was certainly kind of a heightened atmosphere, so to say. And I think it kind of reached that apex where after the election of Donald Trump and the energies that released in different ways kind of led to students asking for a Black Studies program.
One of their demands to the administration was the creation of an African American Studies minor. And then I know they did a job search in which I was hired. And then upon my hiring, the first things I had to do was, one, name the program and present an argument and or justification of why it was named Global Black Studies as opposed to African American Studies. Then I had to design a curriculum. What would the minor program look like? And then after designing the curriculum, then I had to create necessary classes that didn't exist. And from there began recruiting students then to sign up for the first round of Global Black Studies courses.
The first round of classes began in spring of 2022.
We didn't have very many students in that class. It was the first offering of Global Black Studies 200, which is Introduction to Black Studies. We had 3 students. It was interesting. One, the students got a real intense indoctrination into what the discipline is about. It was challenging in some ways because a lot of the materials that I would later have the library purchase to have in the library, supplemental support materials, I hadn't done yet and didn't realize that I needed to do that because as students asked questions and wanted to explore ideas. Obviously it's beneficial if they can go to the library and it's there. They were able to get them through interlibrary loan, but that gave me the impetus to ask the acquisitions librarian to purchase these items for the library. So that was a challenge. And prior to that semester of launching the class, the first GBS course, I had done webinars bringing in Black scholars because it was during the COVID-19 pandemic to familiarize potential students, faculty members, community members, and stakeholders of what actually African American Studies, in this case Global Black Studies, is. What do we do? What type of things do we discuss, right? And then to highlight its interdisciplinary nature and quality.
It's been 2 years since the program started here at Western Carolina, and so far the department has grown quite a bit and has accomplished more than you'd expect.
Student participation and student enrollment has grown. We'll have our first graduates in the spring 2024 commencement. Then we'll have another batch fall 2024 commencement. So now we have students who've entered the minor program as freshmen, first semester freshmen. So they'll have a full experience here at Western Carolina of being a minor as opposed to maybe being a junior and then signing up for the minor. It's more recognized on campus, so different departments and entities on campus, when they want to do a program or get information related to to Black people, if we're being honest, Black people's cultures, et cetera, they now know that they can reach out to the Global Black Studies Programs director, and when they want student perspectives, they know they can reach out to the GBS minors in the Global Black Studies Club.
GBS having their first official graduates are not the only accomplishment of this year.
We went to the National Council for Black Studies annual conference in March in 2024, but we also went to the annual convention in Florida, Tallahassee, Florida. Gainesville, Florida in 2023. But the first time we only were able to take 3 students, but in March 2024 in San Jose, we were able to take 7 students. Our students presented at both conferences, but this year we also won an award from the National Council for Black Studies, an institution award. And it was for our growth, the establishment of our program rooted in genuine black studies, the growth of the minor program, and the excellence in undergraduate research because their research was original research and it was rooted in theories and paradigms germane to the discipline of black studies.
Now, do you think this is something that would have ever happened if this program was never created?
It would not have happened if we're being quite honest. And that's why students, demanded it, for lack of a better way to put it. Because what was happening is students had the opportunity to take black content courses, however, they weren't getting any black studies theory. Secondly, then there was no saliency between the courses, and then fitting them in. So for many, it would have meant then spending extra money, taking extra courses, because we have a liberal studies requirement, and then you have your major and minor requirements, right? So to take 21 credits in black content would have meant at least 15 of those credits would have been extra.
So what comes next for Global Black Studies?
Well, there'll be a transition in leadership for the minor program. So that's a good thing to a large extent. And what I mean is that shows the permanency, or at least in the short range, permanency of the minor program. So it will continue to exist in the near future.
And then the final question is, what's next for Dr. Walton?
Beginning in the fall of 2024, I'll be an associate professor at Lincoln University in Missouri, where I'll be helping them revitalize their African American Studies minor. They have one on the books, but it's lay dormant for a very, very long time. So I'll be going there to help them with that, as well as to teach African American history.
And with that, I think it's only fair that we leave on a high note. The importance of GBS, especially at places like Western Carolina.
It provides students, particularly who intend to provide services to African descendant communities, with skills, insights, cultural, historical understandings that better equip them to provide adequate, accurate, and non-offensive services to those communities, be it marketing, be it education, be it emergency management services, social work, and I can go on and on, right? If you intend to be a social worker or a school teacher, for example, and most of your clients or most of your students will be African American, right? You know, it provides you with further understandings, further skills to adequately, provide those services to them. Secondly, for all students, but I'm going to say primarily, once again, or primarily African American students, most African American students aren't provided much information about African American narrowly or African descended broadly histories and cultural understandings, right? And they live their life very deficient. I know this to be true because at the universities I've taught at, including Western Carolina, first day of every class I teach, I ask, if it's a history class, how many of you all got African American history, K through 12? Very few, if any, will say they have. And if I say how many felt they didn't get enough, all students say they didn't get enough, right? So many students, it serves as an opportunity to then improve themselves, right? By learning more about their cultures and their histories and the various aspects of African descendant people's lives. And then thirdly, it serves for non-African American students, right, to get a more cultural and comprehensive understanding of the African descendant experience. And then fourth, it provides an opportunity for an intervention when it comes to racist or white supremacist thought amongst individuals, and then with the hope then that would impact our larger societies, locally, regionally, statewide, nationwide.